Hello and welcome back to Energy Lab. Today I'm being joined by Dr. Andreas Ludwig. He has a PhD from Simon Fraser University in Canada. His focus was or is on game theory and behavioral science. And currently you're in the process of moving from consulting. You've worked numerous years in the consulting industry to set up your own company surrounding consulting, working on data and behavioral science. Is that correct?
That's true, yes. So after spending years and years in consulting, as you said, we noticed that there's a huge interest in behavioral science. And you might have seen, at least this book. It's called Nudge. Has won the Nobel Prize for economics about 3 years ago. And the question that behavioral scientists are addressing is really to understand why people behave or don't behave in the way that they want to do or that we would expect them to behave, and what can be done about this. So this is what behavioral science is focusing on, and we see a lot of interest here in the region, and so we're in the process of putting a company behind and trying to see if we can make a business on this particular topic, which we're very excited about.
Excellent. And I mean, the purpose of me creating Energy Lab was to create more awareness about renewable energy and sustainable energy projects, not just for Anaware, but in general, and also get more people to adopt renewable and sustainable energy. We as Anaware working in a renewable and sustainable energy sector, I find it personally super frustrating how long the sales cycles are, right? So they vary from business to business slightly, so between on-grid power and off-grid power slightly, but in general they are, I think on average, a year, right? And then you don't win all the projects. Some of the projects go to the competition, or some of them are never realized. And the objective of today's discussion is to understand or get a better understanding about how you can nudge people to renewable, sustainable energy and make them maybe decide faster than the 1 year.
True.
So maybe what does this nudging mean and what is it about?
So look, let me try to make an example on renewable energy. For many problems that we face as society, there are solutions that are technical, there are solutions that are financial, and there's a lot of open space where we don't really understand why things don't work. So if you think about it, you say you have a long sales cycle, right? So you could say, well, we have a goal. We want to generate 25%, 30% renewable energy in the UAE. All the Emirates have these kind of goals. What do? Okay, let's replace some of our power plants that are burning oil right now with renewable energy. This is huge capex, a huge project. It needs to be put in place. And then the question is, who is using this renewable energy? Because maybe you have some issues attached to it. Maybe it's more expensive. Maybe it's not as reliable. All these questions will then come to a decision maker, and the decision maker has to take the decision: should I do it or should I not do it? Right? And in many instances, we tend to focus on the technical solution, and then we tend to focus on a financial solution, giving incentives to use renewable energy, trying to tinker with the prices, and then we end up seeing that still it doesn't work. And this question, why still it doesn't work, this is what behavioral scientists are addressing. So as an economist, I would say, well, it's all a question of price. Make it price parity, they should use it. But as a behavioral scientist, I know that there's things that we call habits. That there's things that we call procrastination. Yeah. We all know that, right? There's things that is loss aversion, insecurity. There also might be, confusion about my options, right? So we call this choice overload. I have too many options. If you give me too many options, I don't know, and because I don't know, I don't do anything. So you stick with what is there, right? So that is the issue, right? So we here in our front lab of our brain, we understand that we need to do something to save the planet. But then again, here in our feelings, we're not really sure. So we basically sit and we're like, the default is good enough.
Is there a difference culturally as well? So, for example, in Germany, and you're German, I'm Austrian, but in Germany, I understand the Germans are willing to pay higher electricity tariffs for more renewable and sustainable energy. So in Saudi, for example, they're still subsidizing energy because, as you said, it's probably traditional and it's something that they're used to, while potentially solar energy is cheaper and they could sell the oil that they would save on the open market and get more money out of this.
That's the economist's answer, right? So as an economist, I tell you that subsidies are bad.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the, I mean, there's not a lot of fundamental truth in economics, and ask one question to 5 economists and you get 10 answers, right? But there are some fundamental truth. And one of them is subsidies are bad. Because usually you subsidize for too many people. You subsidize energy for people that overuse it, that could pay normal tariffs, and that just run a business that is not efficient, that is not, should not be there, but they can make it. They can do aluminium production, for instance, because energy is subsidized. You don't do this. Yeah. It's a waste of resources, right? Now you ask about culture. Right? Now, of course, there is cultural differences. And this has tons of ramifications, but let's say being used to a status quo determines what you expect your government to do, right? So the government promises to you, you have free access to healthcare, you have cheap energy, we subsidize your living. This is what you expect as a citizen. And now what happens as a behavioral scientist, what happens is you want to change this, you experience this as a loss. Right? And this is one of the very, very, very strong biases and obstacles to change, which we call loss aversion. Yeah. The moment you figure something as a loss, experimental evidence has shown that you consider this twice as bad to lose $100 than what you feel good of winning $100. Yeah. So if you frame something as a loss, we take away X, Y, Z, then this is a big, big obstacle.
So basically you're saying, so if the government would say, I'm taking your energy subsidies, and that means you're losing whatever 500 Saudi riyals or dirhams or whatever annually, but in return I give you educational subsidies that are equivalent to that or potentially even higher. People might not recognize it as a
win.
As a win, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, wow.
So there is evidence, and the interesting thing is what these guys have been doing, Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, these guys have done in the laboratory, have demonstrated that there are these biases, and these biases are very, very stable. They are across cultures. You see these things, and you can reproduce them very, very easily. So there's a famous experiment where people are shown some gadgets, some cups, some coffee mugs. And then they are asked, so how much would you pay for it? $2, $1.50, okay. Good. So then they play something and they are able to win these mugs because, they play some games and you win these mugs. No, this is my mug. Now they are asked again, so for how much would you sell these mugs? And out of a sudden, the price of these mugs goes through the roof. $5, no, for $5 I would... And this is what we call status quo preference. Yeah. This is really the moment it's mine, you have to pay me a lot more to get rid of it than what I was in the beginning, what I was able to or willing to pay for it. Okay. So, and in policy, this is actually what happens. So this is one thing. And the second thing that we see a lot is the power of defaults, right? So the other thing that behavioral scientists are looking into is even if you have a very good story and you give me $100 if I do ABC, sometimes it's the small little obstacles that prevent you from doing it. It's like, I completely understand I should do it, no. And then I tried to call this company to install it and the guy doesn't pick up. And you're like, no. Yeah. Right? So, and these small things, they are very important. This is what behavioral scientists have learned, what economists usually ignore. Okay. We usually do, the ROI is positive, you should do it, right? But then people don't.
Okay. So basically you're saying that you're looking at a situation where the economics make sense, technically the solution makes sense, but the client still, because he's used to the status quo, or because some small call doesn't come from a supplier, or he's not available, you don't get the project over the line. Yes. And that's where then nudging comes into play, right? Mm-hmm. So we in the renewable and sustainable energy sector, we frequently see that clients have, to a degree, unrealistic expectations in terms of payback periods, so unrealistically low payback periods, like below 2 years, mm-hmm. which obviously will vary from country to country and from project to project. And sometimes we might be there, but sometimes the payback is also longer, or lower IRRs, etc. So, and if the client doesn't want an EPC contract, so where they buy the system outright, but wants a power purchase agreement, then they need to commit to very long contracts, and they have issues with that, and they want clauses in there that allow them to be flexibility to get out of the contract, which then for the financing party is a problem because they can't refinance it or take it to banks. Mm-hmm. So these complications, and I don't know whether these client expectations are the same in Europe or North America, in more established market where renewable and solar is being used, but certainly here they are. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, and in terms of nudging, how to get them over the line, because as you said, there is a positive payback, there's an IRR, but the aversion to long-term commitment or unrealistic expectations and constantly weighing up options sort of make this extremely long sales cycle.
Yeah. So look, now I'm not an expert in the energy kind of project work. Yeah. What I see is two things. One, as a behavioral scientist, we are talking about the planner and the doer. And one of the problems that you mentioned is that somebody understands something, like I should do it, it's good to do, but then not following through. Or saying, yeah, but let me wait for a bit. You know, I hear you, but I'm not quite sure, you know, if the energy price based on oil is not going so low that you cannot compete anymore, so on and so forth, right? So now, the one thing I would try to do is to engage with the planner in a way to force the doer, mm-hmm. right? To say, okay, I hear your arguments. What is the margin that you are willing to accept for you to say, now I switch? Mm. Okay? You can have this discussion. The problem will be, then he agrees, yeah, you need to be 10% cheaper than energy from oil. And then, okay, you are at 5%. At the moment you are at 10%, you have this discussion again. Yeah. And then, okay. So one of the things that behavioral scientists are doing is, let's try to force my future self, and you know, I mean, there's plenty of examples. Let's try to force my future self to follow through with what I'm doing and agreeing here. Yeah. So let's not make a contract to say, and from tomorrow onwards we do something, but let's write a contract that says, the moment we are 10% below, automatically this contract will kick in. Okay. Sign this now. I don't lose anything right now, right? But I can follow through with this notion, and it gives you kind of, at least, I mean, with governments and big companies, it's always a discussion starter. But at least you have something to say. Look, I mean, we are done. We're here. Let's go, right? Yeah. To avoid this procrastination and this discussion of and this insecurity kind of thing. That's one thing. The other thing is, me, as a behavioral economist, we are focusing on individual people, mm-hmm. right? So the question now for you is, you have your energy provider, but is this person the ultimate decision maker? Or isn't the ultimate decision maker the person who actually consumes energy? And in the European example, as you mentioned, is willing to pay more for green energy, right? How to make this happen? This would be the behavioral data science question that I would try to tackle. How to make sure that people, not all people, but how to make sure that this segment of the population that is aware and willing to pay has an option to do so. Or even better, as we know the power of defaults, even better, the default plan for any new household that goes to Diva to switch on is a green one.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, but the point is, nudging is not about forcing. Nudging is helping people to take the actions that they want to do, but always leave them the option not to.
Yeah.
So that's fundamental about nudging. Otherwise, it's force, it's manipulation, has nothing to do with proper ethical behavioral science. So what you need to do is, look, by default, this thing is green energy. Here, you do something for the community, it's created here, you do something for the environment, and you pay 10% more. Yeah. But here is a very easy, send an SMS, very easy in this number, opt out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is how we structure, and then behavioral science is basically working for you, because you have many people that are, if it doesn't hurt me, I might even not be that interested, but if it doesn't hurt me, I mean, this is the default, okay, fine.
So that's true also, and so especially on the off-grid side, which of Enaware's business, which is a lot less regulated and innovative, we, especially on our earliest contracts, we had to basically take away any kind of concerns of the clients, right? So long-term commitments, they could cancel pretty much the contract for no reason. So it was very one-sided agreements. We offered them cost savings, better service, no commitment, environmental benefits, etc., etc. And then they said, okay, now I don't have any argument anymore. Okay. I have to do it, right? And now over time, we have accounts, basically key accounts, where they're giving us pretty much all the projects because they've seen that this makes so much more sense. They're potentially even willing to give us more of a margin because they see also the service is great. They are willing to take us to other countries, etc. So this is working. I think on the on-grid side, there comes this problem of, if you want to have it financed, you need contracts that are bankable, right? Mm-hmm. Because you know already in the long run, you want to take it to the bank and refinance it. That's not what we are doing, but the financial partner. So I hear you. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. So taking away all the concerns, initially at least, and then you need to prove yourself, and as you gain reputation and references, you can build in probabilities.
Look, there's two things that I want to say. One that you mentioned already. Defaults are very, very powerful. We are very afraid of what could happen, and you go through all these kind of worst case scenarios. It's good. Like from a strategic decision making, you should know what can happen. You know, what's the risk, the exposure. But people have only so much bandwidth to take decisions, even evil decisions, right? So if things are working, people are not constantly poking to try to screw you. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is very interesting from a behavioral science perspective, you mentioned experience, right? You do something innovative, right? What we see now with COVID is that there are many things that we rationally knew, we should do. Why are we spending so much time in commuting every day? Why are we flying, like as a consultant, to our clients and then sit in the clients in a shitty workspace that is dark, and we do the same job that we could have done in our home offices, right? It doesn't make sense, but we had to do it. Why? Yeah. Because as a decision maker, what's very interesting is you can only get to a certain point by rational kind of calculations. Decisions are made emotional. The last bit that puts you over the fence has to do with feelings. Has to do with, my brain needs to imagine how I feel when I do this, if I'm in this situation.
Is that always the case? Because, I mean, both of us have worked in consulting for many years, and there are these models that analyze the different types, whether someone is more analytical and data-driven or top-down, and McKinsey has different models.
The Myers-Briggs.
Yes. and Accenture has their different ones, but more or less they're doing the same thing. And I think that they differentiate also between people that are more emotional and versus more data-driven, or are you saying that all of them eventually decide on emotion?
Look, I mean, and that's one of the things that we want to go towards. I mean, behavioral science is really trying to test how men usually takes decisions. And this is kind of, again, one stereotypical model. It's not the rational choice model that economics traditionally had, that we all hyper calculators and blah, blah, blah. But still we have this one model. And in this one model, there is psychological evidence that people who have a certain dysfunction in their brain and they don't feel emotions, they are unable to take decisions. They can be super good in analytics, but they only come to some point and then they are paralyzed. Now, you try to take this and you try to claim that everybody is like this, which might or might not be true, right? So what we want to do in the company that we want to set up is pairing behavioral science with data science, because we understand that people are different, right? And that certain people might be completely spontaneous, they can only do things that they feels right, and then there are more analytical people that do much more cognitive work before. And we have to develop nudges that are addressing different people, right? So I'm not claiming that everybody is like this, but there's pretty good evidence that at the end, it helps a lot if you can imagine what happens.
Okay.
That's why you test drive a car.
Sure.
Right? And in COVID situation, what happens now is we have experience. Now we have experience. How does it feel to work from home?
Yeah.
And there are people that are very happy with it. I'm happy. I have in my office here, everything's cool.
Yeah.
There are other people, for them it's a disaster.
Yeah.
It could be the surroundings, but it could also be your personality type is super extrovert. You need people around you to energize you. You fall asleep if you are on your own, right? So this is now an experience that we would love to build on and to understand what can we offer, new ways of working, new behaviors in the post-pandemic world for different people, different things, right? Yeah. So now, I think for your question on cultural change, cultural differences, absolutely there are, right? And if you're not sensitized to think about the environment a lot, which, I mean, in Germany it has a long tradition from 1970s, right? The Greens movement, it doesn't exist here, right? So you don't have this significant part of the population who voice their concerns. People might be, right? And so you cannot really build on this, I'd say. Yeah. But I would think that the government has understood what they want to do. There is directives that have been communicated just recently. They know what to do. Now, maybe the government is the actor to say, why don't we overcome this and say, sometimes it's regulation that needs to come in place.
Yeah, so the challenge there is, so we as Anywhere, our client is rarely the government, but the government sets the regulation. So on the Shams Dubai, which is the on-grid regulations, our clients are industrial commercial clients, and they're probably the multinationals are more sensitive because they have these global CO2 reduction targets, and potentially local ones are less sensitive and they need more of a short payback period. So our client, and I agree with you, especially in the UAE, they're taking the right steps in terms of renewal. Also, on just because we spoke briefly on male and female, I feel personally females are more open in general to renewable and sustainable energy. I have less of data points or experience in Europe, but already here in the Middle East, whenever I talk to females, they seem to be more open
And this could, and we share this notion. So I'm very positive about the fact that, especially in Saudi, women are much more prominent in the workforce. And if you think about change, again, loss aversion, status quo preference. If you had a career path available to you over the last 20, 30 years, your family, your father, whatever, had a career path where you go into government, you have a certain function, you do this, you make your life, you feel lost if things change. If you didn't, and it's new, you don't have the loss aversion.
True.
Right? So you're like, hey, I'm willing to do whatever is new. And I think this is why in this region we see a lot of women that are very much engaged, because it's something new.
Well, and probably you even have the government and industries which are a lot related to oil and gas still, and there's probably then a loss aversion and giving up power, right, to a degree as well. And it's understandable that they might be a little bit lagging behind other countries where they're not oil and gas exporters. It's understandable.
But Stefan, you said something important, because you said we are not working for the government directly, but we have our clients that have these targets to fulfill. So for me, another thing that, and there's differences in opinions in economists, but for me as an economist, I always think about the government as putting rules and regulations and enforcing them, right? For me, the government should not run certain services and industries completely, right? But the rules you set, right? And the moment the government sets a different rule, your negotiation position switches. So you say, look, by default, you should have 30% renewable energy in your mix. How can we make sure that the 30% that you have are priced on a very comparable level than oil and gas? Is a completely different discussion than trying to convince you, who can say, well, I'm doing 100% as I always did, convince them to do the 30%, right? So this is the role of government that could help you a lot.
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned related to the nudging, so one, taking away all barriers, right?
Even small ones that,
and then being sensitive to these potentially triggers of a call or availability, not being there when a decision needs to be made. But you also said then the final decision is typically emotional, right? If I understood you correctly. Are there other nudging mechanisms?
Oh, there's tons. So So as behavioral scientists, we are building on a plethora of experimental evidence in the lab, okay? Typically in universities. And you can go to Wikipedia, you will find some, 150, 170 different biases, right? That are impeding decisions and ways to go around them. So how to compete with loss aversion, right? Now, and because it's so complex, behavioral science and the services that we build on behavioral science always are a bit experimental. So what we do is to say we design interventions, okay, but we are not designing one intervention. We usually design 3 interventions or 5 interventions, and we try them. And then your cultural awareness comes into play. If something happened and it worked in South Africa to save water and prevent Cape Town from a water drought, this very thing that they did, we can try to do in Abu Dhabi. And there's good chances that it will work, but there's no guarantee. So we try to also use whatever worked in the US and Europe, and we try to do many things and then try it, right? That is how we think about interventions. And then, if you want, like as a guiding principle, we have a framework that is pretty simple, that you can always ask yourself if you design anything. And this very simple principle is called EAST. Okay, it needs to be easy. The moment you make something complicated, even small complication, like UAE pass. Okay, I want to use this. Great stuff. There's a pin. Yeah, and I cannot set the pin, and I forgot to write it down. Okay, fine. I don't use it. So easy it needs to be. Okay, it needs to be attractive. So you have to have some reason to do it, right? So people don't do stuff that they don't profit off or benefit, at least emotionally from, right? And then there is social.
Okay.
So you can use any kind of social, either pressure if you want, or try to see what kind of social obstacles are there, right? Make it social. Go to the gym, make a group, and you go together. That helps a lot, right? Social. And the last one is timely. And timely is something that is forgotten a lot of the times, right? So if I get my DIWA bill or my email, DIWA has a lot of recommendations how to save energy. They're all great, right? Clean your AC, put your temperature at 25 degrees, blah, blah, blah. All these kind of things, right? But you get it in an email. Where do you read this email? Can you act upon this? Okay, you get the email and you sit at work. You're like, good idea, I should do it. 1,000 things happen, you go home, you have forgotten about it. Because it wasn't timely. You didn't get this intervention at the point where you could stand up and change your thermometer to 25 degrees from 90, right? So these 4 things are guiding principles. And then there's a zillion different other things that can be done, right? That we then build interventions on top and try, right? Try.
Excellent. So you with your new company, you process a lot of, or the objective is when you do this data analysis and behavioral science, you will try to collect a lot of data to make then recommendations to your clients?
So yeah, I'm very excited because we're working on setting up a new company. It will be called Neuland, spelled a bit funny, we'll see. But Neuland is German. It means, the new horizon, the things, the uncharted territory that you step into, right? And I feel that this is the right time. Like our post-pandemic world, we will get over this, but there's many, many more questions, and saving the planet is one of the most important, right? So we need to do new things. So what we want to do is we want to take what behavioral science is giving us and merge it with what data science can do. And data science can do a lot of targeting. So we can, instead of shooting with the same intervention at everybody, we can first understand, okay, we want to save energy or we want to save water in Abu Dhabi. Where are the biggest water users, right? This correlates with the plot size. Interesting, significantly. That means a lot of the water is not used for washing cars, it's used for watering gardens. So maybe if we do an intervention, we don't shoot at each and everybody, we particularly focus on people who have big villas and use a lot of water to water their gardens. So that is how data science can help you to be very specific, very targeted at what person do you, or whose behavior do you want to change? Because that's what you need to understand as a behavioral scientist. You can only change the behavior of a person. You cannot kind of in the abstract, right? And that on the front side, this is what data science is giving us. On the back end, we want to understand your question. What is the ROI? Right? And our claim as behavioral scientists is that we can do very, very cheap interventions. Just reformulate the kind of leaflet that you send to your people. Send out SMS. We don't need a big technological platform and apps and blah, blah, blah. Usually it's small things. And then show you what is the impact. And in order to show this, we need to do this properly as scientists. We need to see what we call a control group. So we want to understand these are the people that we are targeting, sitting in these villas, having this land, blah, blah, blah. But we also want to take out 10% of these people that are exactly the same, statistically speaking, but they don't get this intervention. And then we will run this for half a year, and then we have an argument to say, did it work or did it not work? Because otherwise, what typically happens in policies is you run for everybody, and then you have an effect. And then you have discussions. Yes, but this happened because this year the weather was cooler or whatever. And you can never get out of this. Society is a complex system, and there's tons of options and tons of opinions. But if you have a control group, just like in medical trials, right? If you have a control group, These guys got the placebo, this guy's got the medicine.
Yeah.
You see what happens. Because they all went through the same up and down, the same weather changes, the same tariff changes, whatever it is, right? So this we want to apply and pull it together and help, Department of Energy with energy savings, road safety is a big topic, health, lifestyle questions, exercising is big topics. And the transition to renewable energy would be a very valid point.
Nice.
Yeah.
And in the UAE, your clients will be mainly the government or government and industrial commercial?
So there's two fundamental things. One is government. This is where a lot of the work has been done in the past, and where it's also relatively straightforward to go through, because you're targeting 10,000 households.
Yeah.
And the moment you have size, you can do all of these control groups. You have proper statistics. You can prove your value very, very quickly. The other thing is bigger, larger organizations on how to handle the new normal.
Yeah.
That's another topic that I'm very excited about. Is really to come out of this Corona situation, not with the notion of, oh yeah, we understand you can work from home, so we give you the benefit to work from home because we think we are a good company.
Yeah.
No, to go out and say, look, it happened, right? So nothing has been measured, everything was chaos, we kind of made it, things are good. But on the way back, why don't we do it properly on the way back and say, hey, we take half the people into the office and we measure what happens. Yeah. And then we see, can you work from home or not? Yeah. And based on this, we have new work rules, and this is the experimental side. The data science part is, let's try to understand other variables. Do you have an office in your home? Yes or no? How many kids do you have? Are they at school? What is the distance to travel to the office? Are you coming from Sharjah and go to Abu Dhabi every single day, spend three hours on the road, or are you living just around the corner? So we want to measure these things to say, we want to understand, work policies that say, if you are in this kind of function that doesn't require constant interaction, you are in finance, right? You are in this function, you have an office at home, and you're spending 3 hours a day on the road, you are, remote first. You should work from home. Yeah. If you want, you can always come to the office, but you should work from home. So, and this will then save on office rent for companies.
Well, it depends on the visa situation, right? Frequently, here in the UAE, right, you need office space because it's allocated to visas, but the government obviously can change that as well.
Well, yeah. So real estate, yes, I completely agree. I mean, the whole UAE business model is built on real estate, and let's see how much savings you can actually do in the long run. In the short term, if you think about the safety measures for people who do come back to the office, you need way more space. So in the short term, this is a solution for people to do both, right? To have a maybe more satisfied, as productive workforce who partly work from home as much as they can, right? And want. And on the other hand, a safe work environment where, with the same real estate, you can provide all the distance requirements that you need. So that's why these are two of the two different of the service lines that we want to offer. There are other things that we have in mind, but stay tuned. It will come very soon.
Excellent. We'll provide information in the description below.
In the descriptions down below, exactly.
As much as possible, as much as they are available. Andreas, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Let's hope that you're successful and create a lot of good for the world. Likewise, hopefully we continue being successful and improve the environment and improve sustainable energy. Thanks, Andreas. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please click the like button and subscribe to Energy Lab. Bye.
Thank you.